Hey. All right. Hello, everybody. Oh, we got a good turnout. Sorry, I started a couple of minutes late. That's just how life goes sometimes. I really quickly before I hit go live, I caught up on what you guys have all been saying in the chat. Savvy, I'm so sorry to hear about your little prince. I hope you can find perhaps him in one of his other lives someday. All right. Oh, all right. Alarm reminding me to go live was still active. So, I hadn't realized how much this story has impacted the current novel. Yeah. If it's the one that I'm thinking of, are you still working on the one about the band that they go through a tunnel and then things happen? So I don't want to spoil anything for when it eventually comes out, as it surely will. I could see that having some influence from this one. That's a really great synopsis. Oh, it's this great book. It's about a band. They go through a tunnel and then stuff happens. Very exciting. Anyway. Sorry, I'm just very thirsty today. All right. So welcome back, everybody. I'm glad to have you all here. What am I all right, some stuff happened today I didn't expect to happen, and then all of a sudden it was time for the stream, and then anyway, I got some free blueberries today. That's great news. I hope that I totally forgot to turn off the fan. Thank you, Carolyn. That was probably noticeable.
Hopefully you didn't turn anything else.
How is Pepper? He's great. He's just taking a nap over there on the floor. He doesn't want to join us on the couch today. There's Pepper, just sleeping on a piece of newspaper, like he does. Cats love different surfaces. Anyway, okay, so now we've had a cat update. We had a me update. I hope everybody else is doing good, having a good day. Relatively, all things considered. Yeah, so we had a very intense cliffhanger at the end of yesterday's reading. So in case anybody missed it, or had to leave, Erin, you had to leave early. I want people to kind of be in the right brain space for this serious thing. So I'm going to go back just a little bit. So Jamie and Libby and Billy just had a big conversation at Feng's about potential of what Sugar Bear's deal is, and with the theory that it's possibly they are driven by fear of this disease they've mentioned several times in the book, Hag's disease, which they never really go into exactly what Hag's disease is, but I think that's because ultimately it doesn't really matter. We don't need to know exactly, the symptoms and blah, 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 blah. It's a communicable fatal disease. Sugar bears are pretty cute, by the way. Oh, is there a thing called a sugar bear? Is it a bear, or is it like some weird thing like how water bears are like tiny microscopic bugs? What are sugar bears? I'm Googling sugar bear. I'm getting a lot of body stuff. Oh, sugar gliders. I didn't know they were also called sugar bears. Oh my gosh. Sugar gliders are super adorable. Cute as hell. So yeah, these people who are potentially destroying worlds out of fear of a disease are less cute. Anyway, so they just had that big conversation. Christian showed up, asked questions. They not refused to answer him, but kind of avoided answering because Christian is still somewhat an unknown quantity. And yeah, then All right, said Jamie. As I was saying, how are we going to find their homeworld? I don't know, I said, but now that we know what we're after, we're closer. I just hope they don't kill us all before we find out, said Jamie. Amen to that, I said. In the next room, there was a tinkle of broken glass. I mentally tisked. Then I heard the distant report of a firearm. Someone screamed. What's the secret of comedy? I said to no one in particular, as Jamie took his pistol from his belt and walked into the next room. Libby didn't answer. She was too busy turning the key in the cash register and pulling her 44 from under the bar. I've wandered into a Western, I said. Don't believe it. There were more screams from the next room, and I began to be convinced. Chapter 13. He was a braw gallant, and he rode at the ring, and the bonny Earl of Moray, he might have been a king. The Earl of Moray, traditional. Chaos engenders confusion, springs from disorder. The gentle whitewash of remembrance fails me, and I relive too much. What is this quintessence of dust, as the man said, and on bad days, I know why. I wanted to huddle in the bar and hope anybody who didn't like me wouldn't come looking, but I'm curious as well as cowardly, and sometimes the former dominates for a time. I stopped beneath the arch on the taproom side and stuck my head out to get a glance into the dining room, whence came the tinkle of broken glass at all. And I retained the flashes of sight and sound passing through the tunnel we call memory. The better to cushion the blow, my dear, but the eardrum rings and the retina burns even now when the fixer of all contusions should have twisted its rope enough. They were standing in the doorway holding the sorts of weapons it takes two hands to hold. We had somehow moved from a Western to a gangster film, which is only a difference of props and stage setting, I suppose, but I didn't like it. I ducked back, breathing hard. In that confusion of fear and adrenaline, I doubted what I had seen, so I looked once more, ducked behind my wall again, and the screaming resumed, accompanied this time by a shower of splinters, marking the spot where my head had just been. I resolved at this point to stop sneaking peeks. But I recognized two of those who had come in as Justin and Claude, and I had no reason to think their intentions toward me were any friendlier than they had been before. There was more shooting, and I looked again, my decision forgotten in the heat of the moment. All right, then. Forget the sights and sounds and memories and emotions. I'll just tell you what happened, as I was able to construct it later, and you can supply your own reactions, since you will anyway. Just in case anyone missed our recap of characters yesterday, Justin and Claude are bad dudes. They work for Sugar Bear. They have tried to kill Billy and or destroy Fangs at various intervals. It's not super important to remember which is which. Don't worry about it.
Except that Justin sleeps with Carrie.
Yeah. But honestly, I don't know how much that really matters.
Yeah, and probably not a great deal.
She could have slept with any of them.
It's true.
As long as she didn't sleep with Christian. Christian is an important character. Justin and Claude are kind of like, Tweedledee and Tweedledum of Sugar Bear.
Crab and Goyle.
Yes, exactly. Crab and Goyle, more or less interchangeable. Yes. There was more, since you will anyway, right. The plan involved three of them walking in the front door with automatic weapons, just seconds after two others were to appear from the back with hand weapons. And the group was to simply go through the place, shooting any of us they saw until they found me, and then they could leave after making certain I was dead. How were they to get in the back door, normally kept locked? A customer slipped back there and unlocked it after making certain where I was in the restaurant. The plan was good, and would have worked except that Fred happened to be taking out the garbage. A few days before he was killed, Rich had installed a small light in the back door just to let us know when the door was unlocked. The light was on, and Fred knew it shouldn't have been. Fred was not the sort to let this kind of thing slip by. He picked up his machine pistol and returned to the door to check things out just as it opened, and two heavily armed persons attempted to, as they say, gain entrance. Fred fired, knocking out a window and making someone scream, but not actually hitting either of them. It is much more difficult to hit someone you're firing at than you may think, especially when you're in a hurry and he's shooting back. Fred was good enough that he might have been able to drop them both by taking his time and picking his targets, but he chose on this occasion to just fill the air with so much lead they had to leave, which they quite reasonably did. Jamie and Libby appeared right as they were slamming the door shut. Fred told them, guard the hall, and returned to deal with the front, correctly guessing what was about to happen, but not wanting to leave the back way unattended. There were three of them, as I said, all with full automatic rifles. Tom took out his pistol, but Fred was ready. They saw Fred as he saw them, and everybody fired. When the smoke cleared, one of the attackers, someone I'd never seen, was wounded and running up the street as fast as he could, and Justin had dived out the door, leaving Claude alone in the room. By this time, all the customers were on the floor, most of them screaming. Claude ducked to the side, losing his weapon in the process. He came up with a small pistol and, from a prone position on the floor, shot 3 times at Fred. Then he got up and ran out the door himself as Tom emptied his automatic in Claude's general direction. Fred slumped against the wall, and no one moved. Apparently one of Claude's shots had hit him, though not as badly as far as I could tell. I saw a wound high on his right leg, which hadn't been obvious as Rich's wound had, I suppose due to differences in weapon, bullet, and location. The customers gradually stopped screaming, although one of them continued to moan softly. Jamie and Libby appeared in the room just as I walked in. "I've locked the back door," said Jamie. "Good work," said Fred. Sweat was pouring down his face, and I realized he was in a great deal of pain. Tom put another magazine into his .45, walked up to the window, and looked out it. There was no trace of humor on his features. Libby knelt next to Fred and said, "You all right, babe?" "Fine," he said, gasping. Libby turned and said, "Get him in the back room and I'll look at that leg. We also need to get these people out of here." Tom said, "Better put them in the bar. I don't think it's safe to send them outside." I said, "Oh?" I saw Justin meet up with Claude, and they're sitting in the bakery across the street, probably going to shoot at us. Wonderful. I came forward, wanting very much to feel useful. The room was thick with the harsh smell of gunpowder. There was a blue haze in the air, like and yet more sinister than tobacco smoke. Jamie and I carried Fred upstairs where he could rest on the bedding where Libby and I had made love 12 hours earlier. Rose and Libby coaxed the 10 or so customers into the bar. Fred seemed to be losing a great deal of blood. I pressed his shirt against the wound as hard as I could. Fred's face was covered with sweat, and he winced as I applied pressure. He held out his gun to me. "You want to use this?" "No. Now shut up." "Yes, sir." I went back out. Libby was just finishing getting all the customers into the bar. Tom yelled, "Watch it!" and ducked. There was a spray of glass and someone screamed again. I told Libby, "He's upstairs, lying down." She nodded and set her pistol on the table, disappeared and back. Tom stood up, fired out the window, and ducked again. Jamie did the same thing. I stayed down. There was a thunk somewhere above my head and off to the right, and I was sprayed with particle board as a bullet hit the wall. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was too dry. Rose huddled on the floor next to Jamie's right leg. This continued for a while. Tom selected a magazine from the pile at his feet and reloaded. Jamie used the quick loader for his revolver, tossed it over his shoulder as if for luck. They both fired out the window again. There was a pause in which I crawled over to Tom and said, "What the hell's going on?" He shrugged. "There's at least a couple of them in the bakery across the street. They shoot, we duck. We shoot, they duck. No one's going to hit anyone." "Great," I said. "I wonder why the police haven't shown up." "Hell if I know." Jamie said, "Maybe we should rush them." At that point, Libby, who had just emerged from tending to Fred's wound, walked past him. She said, "Good idea." She picked up her pistol and carried it loosely at her side. Then she just walked out the door, turned toward the bakery, and started shooting. Jamie was the first one after her, with Tom right on his heels, then me, then Rose. What Rose or I thought we were going to do, I don't know. There wasn't anyone on the street except one gray sedan with the Muni insignia on the door. That's the local police force, in case you forgot. The bakery was small and ugly, with exterior brick up to 3 feet, then plate glass windows, perhaps 4 feet long and 3 feet wide, separated by thin metal strips. The windows displayed loaves of bread and pastries. All of these windows were broken. Most of the pastries were ruined. As we came out, Libby, Tom, and Jamie fired. Justin and Claude emerged and began running down the street, I guess deciding the bakery was a poor place to have a gunfight after all. Jamie and Libby shot at them and missed, and we all set off. I wondered what I thought I was going to do if we caught them. It was growing dark, and I wondered if that would make a difference. Claude, in front, reached the door of Le Bureau Théâtral du Nouveau Quebec. It occurred to me that, once inside, they would know the place really well, and that they might have reinforcements waiting. I guess the same thoughts occurred to the others, because they put on a burst of speed, and we were right behind them in a narrow hallway with no possibility of cover for anyone. If they stopped, I think they could have had us all then, but instead they continued past a receptionist's desk to what looked like a copying center, with several machines and a sturdy bookcase or two. There was a window in the back, and at first I thought they'd go through it and keep running, But instead, they stopped below it and turned to face us like boars at bay. I was just outside the window. I was just outside the room. Rose was behind me. Libby and Jamie and Tom were almost in the door. Squat, curly-haired Claude fired a shot at Jamie, and tall, long-haired Jamie went down behind a copier. I couldn't tell at the time if he had ducked or been shot, and neither could Claude, who kept shooting at the machine, hoping to pierce it and hit him. Claude's pistol was small, but in that room seemed much louder than the bigger weapons had in Feng's. My ears hurt. Justin had a machine pistol, but Tom moved too quickly. He rolled behind a bookcase, came up, fired several times. He missed, but I saw where the bullets hit near Justin's head. Justin ducked down. The 45 was very loud as well. Libby fired at Justin, and well, for noisemakers, you'll have to put the 44 automag up there with Spinal Tap and 747s. She fired at Claude, and I stayed down and figured that ear damage was the least danger I was in. She kept alternating shots at Justin, who was behind a machine, and Claude, who was just behind the counter. There was a lull while she reloaded, during which Justin stood and went crashing out the window. Tom leapt through the window after him, 45 flailing about in his hand. I guess this was too good a chance for Claude to pass up, because he stood suddenly and carefully aimed for Tom's back. A sick feeling hit my stomach, so I yelled, and so did Rose, but we needn't have bothered. Jamie stood up from behind the machine and fired. Claude spun and slammed against the wall, looking very surprised, and I saw an exit wound in front of his shirt, just like Rich's, and I was glad. Claude was working on raising his pistol when I heard the hammer fall on Jamie's empty revolver. Claude's face lit up. There was another gut-wrenching frozen moment, but then there was another ear-shattering explosion as Libby put a shot into Claude's stomach. Claude dropped the pistol and crumbled to the ground, and now the look on his face wasn't surprise, it was pain, and I thought of Rich again, and I liked that too. Libby fired then, again, then kept putting bullets into his body until her gun was empty. I turned away before that point. I started to shake in the deafening silence. "Let's go back to Feng's," said Jamie after a moment. I realized I was having some trouble hearing him for the ringing in my ears. His face was slack and he looked very tired. Libby didn't answer. There was an expression on her face I couldn't read. Rose said, "What about Tommy?" "I don't think he'll come back here," I said. "Let's just get back to Feng's where it's, well, safer." Jamie and Rose and I left the office. I heard Libby's footsteps behind us as we reached the door and stepped out onto the street. We turned up towards Feng's in the growing twilight, and I stopped cold. Sergeant Iverness stood in a crouch, his pistol held in both hands and pointed at Jamie. Christian stood easily in an ankle-length leather coat, cigarette dangling from the corner of his mouth, a pump-action shotgun pointed loosely at Libby. I was glad Tom, at least, wasn't around, and I'd hoped he'd be all right. "Toss your guns to the side," said Iverness crisply. His voice came as through a distance due to the ringing in my ears, and this added to the sense of unreality about the entire scene. Jamie sighed and let his gun drop. I heard the sound of Libby's dropping as well. What the hell, they were empty anyway. Christian moved the shotgun to cover Rose, who had her hands jammed into her jacket pocket. The rest of us stood with our hands well away from our bodies. Iverness said, "Where's the skinny guy?" I shrugged. He studied me for a moment, then turned to Christian and nodded. "Let's get it done." Nodded. "Let's get it done," he said, again as from far away. I knew it couldn't be real. Christian swung his shotgun until it was pointed at Libby. Then Iverness faced me and pointed his pistol dead at my chest. And I saw his face tighten just a little, and I could actually see, or imagined I could see, his fingers squeezing the trigger. I closed my eyes just to show how brave I am and waited for the bullet. Next to me, Jamie had time to say, quite clearly and distinctly, "Well, shit." Then I heard the sound of a shotgun twice in quick succession, and I winced and waited for the impact. And waited. Presently, I looked. Iverness lay on the street, and I averted my eyes from what was left of his face. Christian's shotgun still pointed at him. He bumped another round into the chamber, walked over to the body, touched it with his foot. I think he was checking to make sure he was dead, but I averted my eyes again. None of us moved. None of us spoke. We stood there in spreading darkness and looked at one another and at Christian, who returned our look from slitted eyes. Rose said, "Perhaps we should go inside now?" "Good idea," I said, "and you can put that thing away any time." "What? Oh, this?" She put the derringer back in her pocket. I never got to shoot it anyway, she said. Christian shot first. I noticed that, I said. And to Christian, why? I've never liked cops, he explained. That's where Christian becomes the hero of the whole book. I never liked cops, is all he has to say when he just switched sides.
Great cab, am I right?
It's the tooth. That was as good as I needed just at that moment. Jamie and Libby retrieved their weapons and left Iverness lying there. We walked back to Feng's. Did I mention before that I'd wandered into a western? It felt like it more than ever as we walked through the deserted streets. It would have been funny if it weren't so spooky. When we got there, Jamie stepped in front of me, though he wasn't armed either. I stood inside and looked around. There was still a faint smell of gunpowder, but the blue smoke had dispersed. There was a fair amount of broken glass, chipped woodwork, and smashed crockery, and I could see it would take some cleanup, but it was home. We sat down at a table, and I said to Christian, well, when are the police going to show up? I don't know, he said. You weren't supposed to live through today, so nobody made any contingency plans. Sugar Bear really does own the whole police department, don't they? Pretty much the whole city, said Christian. Damn. Jamie nodded thoughtfully, then suddenly turned to Libby. By the way, he said, why did you charge out there like that? That was crazy. You could have... Fuck off, said Libby, acid in her voice. Well, shit, said Jamie, but didn't push it. To change the subject, I asked her, how's Fred doing? We should tell him what... The bullet hit an artery in his leg, said Libby. He's dead. Poor Fred. I think the first time I read that, I suspected that when she suddenly left his side, being a paramedic, not a soldier, and charged out the front door.
Yeah, as she was doing that, I was like, no, they need Libby. She's the only paramedic.
Yeah. Might not have been thinking clearly in that moment.
And now another Fred is dead.
I was trying to remember if Fred ever says the word right, like as a sentence, and if it is written in the book at any point as right, said Fred.
That would be funny too.
Yeah. Should cover that song. It's a song. Did you know?
I had
not just the band that did the song. Whatever it's called. I'm too sexy. I don't know if that's just the title, but the band Right Said Fred. That is the name of like a music hall vaudeville era song.
I did not
It's
know
very
that.
goofy. It's a weird song for them to have named their band after, considering what they sound like.
Right.
When I found that out, I was like, huh, okay.
Another musical side note. He mentioned Spinal Tap. In this universe, I wonder if Spinal Tap is a real band.
I would say it's. Could go either way, right?
Right. Exactly.
But if we assume that this book is the same universe as we live in up to 1990 or so,
true.
Up to the late 80s anyway. They never make it explicit.
It doesn't diverge until after that.
Yeah.
So. True enough.
True enough. It would be, either way, the statement stands.
I would find it greatly gratifying if Spinal Tap was a real band.
Well, let's just say they are. Nothing's stopping us. I don't think it bears on the plot at all if Spinal Tap is real or not.
I don't think so. I sincerely doubt it.
All right. I'm just going to take one little moment. Just redo my ponytail that was starting to fall
I had a lot of death lately, so levity was...
Yes.
Needed some levity.
Good point. Yeah, it gets it's pretty intense. I mean, actually, I think that was the most intense chapter. But sorry for I had intended to put warning, death and gun violence is about to happen, but I forgot.
That might be a good idea.
Yeah, I figured with everything that's happened so far, people wouldn't be entirely surprised that it was coming at some point in the book. But I meant to say it at the beginning of the chapter, and I just totally forgot. So
you could add it to the video descriptions.
That's a good point. Maybe I'll do that.
Just like a brief,
because it's as he says, he just kind of says what happened.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, it's not unexpected.
It's very matter of fact though, and that can be hard to hear for people who have dealt with gun violence.
Yeah,
So.
and just if you're
I might put a little
to the characters.
Well, yes, that too, but
some.
that doesn't require a content warning as much as someone
right. Yeah, not as much, but
all right, we have another intermezzo. Now with this loaded blunderbuss, the truth I will unfold. He made the mayor to tremble and robbed him of his gold. Brennan on the Moor, traditional.
I feel like I've heard that.
Yeah, I don't think I know that one. He lived in a single room, sharing bathroom and kitchen with the junkie to the right and the prostitute across the hall. The mattress took up one corner of the room. His hollow body electric and acoustic took up that one corner. His antique, honest-to-God real, 200-year-old Fender Stratocaster got the guitar stand. Next to them was his shotgun, 2 pistols, and ammo boxes. On the other side of the room were his piles of clothes, one dirty, one clean. He could usually tell them apart. Next to them, books. Flaubert, Dickens, Hugo, Hawthorne, Dumas. A few contemporary novels, some current works of political studies and music theory. Just at the moment, he was working on soloing over 13th formations, playing in the Mixolydian scale. Mixolydian scale. I'm not a technical musician. Emphasizing the 7th and the lower octave and 6th and higher. He was lost, as he always was. The rest of the world did not exist. Music was all there was. The music in his head, the music from his guitar, as he concentrated on making every note speak, on phrasing and dynamics, and the creation of beauty. There was a sharp rap at the door. He stopped playing. What the hell? Who is it? Municipal police force. He frowned, set the guitar down, opened the door. The big one in front said, "Sir, we've had a complaint about noise." "From who?" "I'm afraid we can't say. Someone in the building." Here the cop sniffed. "Jesus Christ, it's not even 10 o'clock. What's the problem?" The cop's face changed then, and he said, "Look, punk, I don't give a..." "Hold it," his partner, a shorter guy he almost recognized. "What?" The partner said, "Aren't you Christian Jury?" "Yeah, so?" The two of them had a hasty, whispered conference. Then the short one said, "Excuse us, never mind." Another one who took orders from Rudd, Christian decided, which made him a friend of Iverness's. Christian smiled to himself. Must be Iverness. He mostly helped Rudd out because he liked Ivy and because it was fun to test his nerve from time to time, to get out some of his frustrations, but every once in a while it paid off in unexpected ways. He said, "Before you go." "Yeah? Who was it?" "Huh? Oh." The cop pointed straight down. "Thanks." "Forget it." When they left, Christian went back into his room, picked up his .38, replaced one live round with a blank load, and cocked the pistol with the blank under the hammer. He walked down the stairs and kicked open the door to the guy's room. He didn't know the guy who had just moved in, but he didn't really care. He was fat and balding and very surprised as he sat watching the TV. Christian stuck the barrel practically up the guy's nose and said, "You got a complaint, motherfucker?" "What?" "I said you got a noise complaint to make? Am I interfering with your peaceful enjoyment of the evening?" "No." "Good. You're interfering with mine." Christian smacked him across the face with the gun while simultaneously firing it. Then he put a round into the TV and left without looking back. He went up to his room, set the pistol down, picked up his guitar again, began laying down melodic phrases on top of chord progressions in his mind.
Jeez.
Very, very intense past for a very chill, easygoing guy that we know Christian to be up to this point.
I wonder what the turning point in that one is.
Well, you can get a little bit more.
Oh, I thought that was the end of it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. In that one? You mean, I thought you meant in that one as in Christian, as a character.
Oh, no, yeah, in that intermezzo.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, most of these represent some sort of turning point that brings the character to where they are.
Yeah.
Maybe because that was like the farthest he'd ever gone or something like that. He does say he mostly helped out Rudd because he liked Ivy, so he's not like, "I am committed to Sugar Bear and everything they stand for."
Right. But
Or that one might just be giving us a little more of Christian's backstory, and it doesn't represent really a turning point.
Yeah.
Anyway, chapter 14. Up the long ladder and down the short rope, to hell with King Billy and God bless the Pope. Up the long ladder, traditional. He's dead, said Libby, toneless, even, distant. Leave it there, just for a minute. Why? Perhaps as a gesture of sympathy made out to whoever needs it at the moment. We'll find out soon enough, I suppose, and cash it in then. Fill in the moment your fill in the sorry. Fill in the amount with your chosen investment in the coin of love, hate, excitement, disgust, intrigue, boredom, or however you spend your life. Leave it there. We'll come back to it. When Rich died, scenes had returned to me, incidents which captured who he was to me, and this had brought his death home, yet kept it at a distance and begun the healing process. But I guess I never really knew Fred. There was a distance about him at all times, a formality that was not cold but didn't invite closeness. He was good at what he did, and he was dependable, but he was almost more of an automaton than a real person. Jamie, I guess, was closer to him than anyone except Libby, and that was perhaps because they were so different. Jamie was loud while Fred was quiet. Jamie was warm and emotional while Fred was cold and rational. But now Jamie was alive and Fred was not, and I wished I'd known him better, that I might mourn him as he deserved. Those were thoughts at the time, in that first instant after Libby's announcement. I don't know what thoughts the others had, but there was a silence for a long, long moment, broken suddenly by Tom's arrival. He walked in the door so cautiously that it would have been comical if it weren't so reasonable. Then he looked around and said, "What is it?" We told him. He went up to Libby and held her. It looked like she was about to start crying, but she caught herself and said, "I'm all right. What happened to you?" Tom opened and closed his mouth, still holding Libby. Then he said, "Justin outran me, which is just as well, since I realized my gun was empty and I left all my spare magazines back here." He shook his head like it was a joke, but I couldn't help shuddering. "What happened with you guys?" he said. I said, "Did you go by Le Bureau?" "No." "Well, if you do, you'll find a few bodies in the area." "Oh?" "Claude, for one." "Good work. Who got him?" "Jamie and Libby." "Good," said Tom, like he meant it. "Claude's the one who killed Fred," said Jamie. "Oh," said Tom. "Who else?" "Would you believe the cop, Iverness?" "Really? We're going to have the whole city on our asses. Who shot him?" Jamie gestured with his head toward Christian, who was sitting in the far corner. Tom stared at him. "I thought you were on their side." "I was." "What happened?" "I don't know," he said. "I was just standing there, about to shoot Libby, and I couldn't. I had to shoot Ivy instead. I don't—" "Ivy?" said Rose. Christian shrugged. "I've known him a long time." "You are with Sugar Bear," said Jamie softly. "I was. I don't think I am anymore." "But I don't get it. Why did you do all that stuff?" "What stuff?" "Why were you with them?" He lit a cigarette and turned away. I thought he wasn't going to answer us, but he finally said, "That's a hard one. I never thought about it much. I just did it. I was brought up that way, like we were special because we were going to still be around when all the sickies killed themselves." I said, "You mean when you guys wiped out? I didn't know about that until you guys told me." "Oh, what did you do?" "Pretty much what I was told. Security stuff, making sure people didn't find out about us, helping to keep the organization safe. It didn't come together until just now when I had to kill Libby and couldn't. Even when Ivy and I charged in the back door, if Fred hadn't been there, we'd have gone through and shot you down." "You sure kill easy," I said. He said, "Yes, I do," looking me in the eye. After a moment, I looked away. Jamie said, "Well, I believe you." "Me too," I said. "I guess you're with us now," said Tom. "I guess so." "I don't suppose," I said, "you could tell us where the homeworld is?" "No, I hadn't even realized there was one until you mentioned it. I've never been very high in the organization." "Hmm. So we still have to figure out how to find it." "The physician would know." "Who's the physician?" Rudd mentioned him. "The big boss. I don't even know if he's on Lawyer or somewhere else." "Oh. Well, how do we find him? Susie would know. Oh, wonderful, I said. I have real doubts that she'd tell us. Yeah, me too. We could ask her, though, I said. I know where she lives. She's moved, said Christian. To where? I don't know. Wonderful. But I think her friend Carrie would. Tom shook his head. This just keeps getting better, doesn't it? At least we know what we have to do, I said, if the cops don't show up and drag us all in. I think we're going to be safe for a while, said Christian. Only those at the top really know what happened, and it'll take them a while to figure out what to do. Good, I said. Tell me something, said Jamie to Christian. How did Sugar Bear find out about us? I don't know exactly. I got word of you from Monsieur Rudd and was told to keep track of you, and what were you told about us? That people here were on the side of the sickies and might have to be stopped. I see, I said. That's worth knowing. But, said Jamie, why were you after Billy in particular? Christian shrugged. I don't know. Word came down. If you want to believe it, there's a rumor the physician has means of communicating with the future. I believe that, I said. Me too, said Jamie. He looked over at Libby, who still hadn't spoken. She was trying very hard not to be upset. Jamie went over to her. I started to, but found I couldn't. Roasted. Yes, as Aaron points out, too many X's.
Yeah.
I think that guy's ex-girlfriend would know.
Yeah.
Well, where is she? I don't know, but that guy's ex-girlfriend would know where she is. What a mess, eh? Although you kind of have to wonder if maybe Carrie was actually told to get involved with Tom.
Yeah.
To kind of get inside the organization or something.
It certainly seems like one of them was.
Yeah.
And as likely as Susie seems, her reactions don't fit.
Right, yeah. Because then when they start asking questions, instead of feeding them wrong information or something, right, she just cuts them out.
Yeah.
Or cuts Billy out.
And she wouldn't look so scared when they mentioned Sugar Bear.
Yeah, and she was sort of hostile. She would have been prepared for that. She wouldn't have been so hostile toward Tom.
Yeah.
Carrie is a little more, like, malleable as a person, I think, than Susie.
I mean, yeah. She's a junkie, for one thing. So,
yeah.
Like, usually that gives people some leverage over you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe I shouldn't make comments about characters overall when we haven't finished the book yet, but I feel like as much as we know about Carrie so far kind of indicates she's not a bad person, but she is perhaps a little easy to control.
Yeah.
She's not a super strong person. Honestly, she could be the person from the House of Fear. Maybe that's why it doesn't matter who it mention who it is. Maybe it's supposed to be like, this could be Eve. It could be Carrie. Who knows?
Interesting.
I wonder if that's why. Because
I wonder.
I'm pretty sure it's the only one. I think we have
if Carrie's enough of a character to get an intermezzo.
Yeah, well, I guess that remains to be seen. There's at least one more intermezzo in the book. So.
Yeah, anyway.
And I can't remember who hasn't gotten one yet.
Yeah.
Anyway. I should have said before we started having that conversation, like, hey, Esty, I know you're a few minutes behind on this video. We're about to just talk about whatever for a second. You can skip ahead. Anyway, too late now. All right, where was I? Oh, okay. I caught Tom's eyes and we went upstairs where the body lay. She had folded his hands on his stomach, and a silver ring I thought I recognized as Libby's was on the little finger of his left hand. I thought about her slipping it onto his finger and folding his hands like that, and I couldn't see for a little while. Tom and I finished wrapping him up in one of the spare blankets and took him outside. It had gotten quite dark, and there was no one in sight. I wondered about the customers who had been trapped inside for several minutes and what happened when they'd called the police. But one thing at a time. We took care of Fred's remains as well as we could, which wasn't very, and I'll spare you the details. When we got back to Feng's, we were both in pretty ragged shape. Libby hadn't moved, except that she and Rose had their arms around each other, and Jamie was next to her. Christian, to my surprise, was also talking to her. Tom and I sat in the far corner. I said, well, are you going to get a hold of Carrie so I can get a hold of Susie so we can maybe get this over with? I suppose, he said. But Billy, is this ever going to be over? I mean, are we going to be able to just live someday? Maybe. Why ask me? Tom shrugged and watched the clump around Libby. It was impossible to read his expression. I checked the clock, but a bullet had stopped it at 6:22. I went into the bar and read 9 o'clock. It was amazing that no more time than that had passed. I looked out one of the windows, but the rest of the block was still silent, like everyone was huddling inside his house for fear of being caught up in something dangerous. Pretty reasonable when you thought of it. I can't believe the police haven't shown up, said Tom. I know. We need to decide what to do, though. Go back home? Maybe. Want to call Carrie? No. I will, though. He walked back to the bar to do this. Jamie got up and went into the back, carrying a shotgun. I resisted asking him what he was doing, and a bit later I heard sawing noises and didn't need to. Tom came back and said he couldn't reach Carrie. Rose and Libby got up and disappeared into the back. Libby's eyes were red and she looked tired. Christian joined Tom and me. How's she doing? I asked. As well as you can expect, said Christian. I think she'll be okay. She said she could have saved him if she'd gotten to him sooner, but from hearing her describe the wound, I don't think she could have, and I think she really knows that. Give her time, she'll be all right. We don't have time, I said, but only under my breath. The sawing sound stopped, to be replaced by filing noises that were just as loud. I hope she can sleep over the racket, I said. Tom said, do you think any of us will have a full night's sleep tonight? I shrugged and looked at Christian. He said, I don't know. If they haven't shown up yet, they might not, but there's no way to be certain. You keep saying we, I said. They speak French here, said Tom. If I go back home, they'll kill me, said Christian. I understand, I said. I was just joking. A little while later, Jamie emerged. His shotgun was now about a foot shorter and looked very nasty. Christian said, 12 gauge. Yeah. Good, we can share ammo. I'm getting low. We're going to kick some ass, said Jamie, more grimly than enthusiastically. We're going to sleep first, I said. Jamie said, someone should stay awake in case something happens. I sighed. Yeah, you're right. I'll take the first watch. Wake me in an hour and a half, said Jamie. Right. I'll be next, said Christian. I looked at him for a long time, then said, all right. Then Rose, then Tom. We'll let Libby sleep, if she can. If we all can. But for whatever reason, we could. If anyone's behind, right now, skip ahead like 30 seconds, okay? Just to give you like a little jump up. All I'm going to say is that I am always absolutely amazed when people are able to sleep during times like this in books. I know that it would be very good if you could. You need sleep at a time like this.
Right.
Because a lot of shit has just happened and a lot more shit is going to happen. But things are quiet for the moment. But like, if someone was like, I'll take the first watch, I'll wake you in an hour and a half, I'd be like, cool, I won't be asleep in an hour and a half. I can't just make myself sleep and then wake up an hour and a half later. That cannot happen.
True.
But at least he acknowledges, like, well, if we can, and then amazingly they can.
Yeah.
I guess weird things
if
happen.
You're exhausted enough, your body just takes over.
That's true. In weird enough circumstances and exhausting enough circumstances, your body and brain might just be like, I can't even handle what's going on. Pass out.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Coming back to read again. My first thought upon waking was, we actually made it through the night without trouble. Then I began to wonder what would happen today and started to realize just how big a fix we were in. A depressing way to wake up, but there was something satisfyingly familiar about lying in the pantry of Feng's on a pile of coats and spare blankets. It reminded me of happier times, lying there with Rose and Jamie and Tom and everyone, with nothing to worry about except our next night's set list and when the next bomb would hit. I got up and found Tom sitting in a booth with his arms folded and his legs stretched out in front of him. He was wrapped in a blanket. He turned around and said, there's coffee. Good. I made a close sign and hung it on the door. I nodded. I noticed someone put plywood over the broken windows. Jamie did that. I said, I've never seen the place closed during business hours before. Neither have I. Libby's going to have to. Ugh. Neither have I. Libby's going to have some words with Feng. Then, she's the only one of them left, isn't she? Yeah, I guess she is, with Eve being in the hospital. I'm getting myself some coffee. Want some? Yeah, thanks. Speaking of Eve, as soon as things settle down even a little, we need to go see her. Yeah. God, I kind of forgot Eve was still in the hospital. Jesus.
Yeah.
Not convenient. Not that any of this is convenient, but
I mean,
degrees.
she at least is probably able to sleep because she's probably heavily sedated.
Yeah. At least she's safe, relatively
Yeah.
speaking.
Yeah.
I guess. Wait,
I mean,
if they have people in the hospital, maybe she's not safe, but she's at least safe from the guns.
yeah.
I'm getting myself some coffee. Want some? Yeah, thanks. Speaking of Eve, as soon as things settle down even a little, we need to go see her. Yeah. I got the coffee, came back. Maybe I'll make us some breakfast. I like working in a professional kitchen. Well, I like your cooking. Thanks. Should we wait until everyone else is up? Maybe. But then you can't use mushrooms because Rose and Libby don't like them. And you can't use onions because Jamie doesn't like them. And God knows who doesn't like whatever else you'd want to cook with. What don't you like, Tom? Being a pinhead? Being stuck in here? Worrying about whether we're going to be killed? Worrying about nuclear war? Not being able to just relax and play music? Should I keep going? We might be able to do something about the last. Well, we all have our instruments. That would be good, if we can find the time. There was a knock. Tom picked up his .45 from where it was sitting on the table and walked over to the door. He looked out, carefully keeping his body to the side. He yelled, "Sorry, we're closed." He came back and sat down, setting the gun back on the table. Yeah, I'd like to play a few songs. It's been a while. What's wrong? Nothing. It's just that you... Nothing. Presently, Jamie and Rose got up, and shortly after, Christian joined us. We drank coffee until Libby got up. She nodded hello to us, and there was an anger in her walk and the tilt of her head. I retired to the kitchen. I turned the big grill on low. I found a large cast iron skillet and melted some goose fat over one of the gas flames while I took the medium French chef's knife and sliced half a dozen onions and 2 big green peppers and crushed some garlic cloves. When the fat was sizzling, I threw the garlic in along with a little salt. I cleaned some mushrooms, put the onions and peppers in the hot fat, then sliced the mushrooms to the happy sizzling sounds. I took out 2 dozen eggs and beat them, then put the mushrooms in the skillet. I added milk to the eggs, whipped them a little more, and dumped them in the skillet when the onions looked almost right. I turned down the heat, buttered 12 pieces of sourdough bread, and put them on the grill. Then I added some chives, salt, and pepper to the eggs, as well as a little cayenne, and, just before they were done, I added a tablespoon of half-hot Szeged noble rose paprika. Apologies to anyone who speaks Polish. No idea how that word is pronounced. Szeged. I've never actually had to pronounce it. I've always just thought it in my head as the word that it is without actually hearing it. Anyway, I added a tablespoon of half-hot, whatever, noble rose paprika, which would never exist again. I buttered the other side of the bread and turned it on the grill, then dished the eggs onto 6 plates along with the sourdough bread and carried them out 3 at a time. Fred could have carried all 6 without a tray. Rose and Christian complained about the mushrooms. Jamie complained about the onions. Libby didn't say anything. Tom said he liked it. After we'd eaten, Rose said, "I'll wash the dishes since you made breakfast." Breakfast. That's what she said. I explained that I would not try to talk her out of doing the dishes. She gave me a kiss and said, "You cook good, even if you do use fungus." There came another knock at the door. This time Jamie got it, holding his sawed-off shotgun down at his side. I noticed that Christian's shotgun was near to his hand. No one else seemed concerned. Jamie said, "It's Carrie." I looked at Tom. He raised his eyebrows. "Well, should we let her in?" "Might as well," I said. Jamie opened the door while Carrie slipped inside. She was wearing a long coat of some white fur. She started to walk toward Tom, but stopped when she saw Christian. Her eyes widened. "It's all right," said Christian. "I've switched sides." She stared, and her mouth worked. Christian said, "Have you?" She looked puzzled. "I don't know." "Figures," said Christian. He spat. Tom said, "We need to know where your friend Susie is." "I can't tell you that." "Why?" "I just can't. She doesn't want anyone to know. She'd kill me." Tom turned away. She said, I came over to see you." "About what?" She looked at us. The rest of us moved away to give Tom and Carrie room to talk privately. The two of them spoke softly together. Tom's face was grim, and his fists clenched several times as they spoke. I got tired of watching very quickly, so I went back to the pantry and got out my banjo. I played Cripple Creek, and for a short time, the world looked brighter than it had. Brighter than it was, I guess. Tom joined me. I stopped playing. Tom sat down, and I said, "Well?" "I'm a pinhead." "So what else is new? Has Carrie heard about the big fight?" Justin told her. There was no mistaking the bitterness in his voice as he pronounced that name. "I guess Sugar Bear is really mad at us now, but they don't know what to do." "Why haven't they sent the police in after us?" "She isn't sure. Or at least she says she isn't sure. I think there's a lot of stuff she isn't telling me." What else did she say?" "Personal things." "Ah, nothing new. Nothing good." "Oh, any luck getting her to tell us where Susie is?" "She won't say. She's too scared." "Damn. Well, we'll have to keep trying." "Has she left?" "No, she wants to know if she can stay here with us." "Why?" "She's frightened." "Of whom or what?" "I'm not sure. She wouldn't say." That, as Christian would say, is some shit. I walked out there. Libby and Christian were in the corner talking in whispers. I could hear Jamie and Rose in the kitchen cleaning. Carrie looked up, and her blue eyes looked very wide and frightened. I sat down next to her and said, "Why is it you want to stay here?" "Because I do." "Do you have to know why?" "Yes." Duh. That's my editorializing. Yeah, you're technically still part of the team that is trying to murder us.
Yeah.
Yes, we would like to know your motives for wanting to be in this building with us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Fucking Carrie. Fucking Carrie.
Yeah.
Ugh. I mean, I have some sympathy for her because she's clearly not a very strong person.
Right.
But
Yeah.
God damn it, woman.
Yeah. I mean, she clearly is not used to thinking for herself or anything.
Exactly.
Like that.
It looked like she was about to cry. She said, "I don't have anywhere else to go. I can't be with Justin anymore. And Susie is hiding." "You don't know where?" "I can't say." I said, "Why not?" "You don't know what she's like." "Yes, I do." "No, she terrifies me. It's like when she's around." "I know about it, believe me. But that isn't why you aren't telling us, is it?" "Yes, it is. I just can't do something that would make her angry." "Great," I said. "Then you sure as hell can't stay here." Tell me why I should trust you. If you're here, how do I know you won't open the doors in the middle of the night? If you're so weak you can't risk making someone angry at you, how can I be sure that a little pressure, especially from her, would make you sell us out completely? Don't you realize they are trying to kill us?" She didn't say anything. She just stared at the ground, and her shoulders shook. "There are times when you just have to be a hard ass, and this was one. Unfortunately, I've never really been up to the job." I sighed. "Okay, here's what you can do." I dug around in my pocket for a while. "Here's the key to our apartment. We aren't using it, so you..." "What is it?" Nothing." I looked at her. There'd been no mistaking that reaction. "What is it, Carrie?" "Nothing. I just..." "Don't bullshit me. There's something about the apartment, isn't it?" "No, there isn't any. Is it bugged? Is that it?" No, I was just..." "Are they waiting for us there?" "No." "Are they going to burn it down?" She looked away. I said, "Is that it, Carrie? They're going to blow the place up? Do they think we went back there instead of here?" She buried her face in her hands. After a moment, she nodded. "When?" I asked her. "It's set to go off at noon." "Jamie," I yelled, "what time is it?" "About 12:05, he yelled back. I licked my lips and stared at Carrie, who sat there and shook. "How precise was the bomb? Was it just the apartment or the whole building?" "I don't know. It was Justin. He's good with bombs. He might have just gotten the apartment." "Might have? Great. Or he might not have. There were 6 apartments in that building, Carrie. How many were just blown up? Is there a fire going? How many people are going to die from it, Carrie? How many people just burned to death because you're too scared to tell anyone what's going on in time to stop it? She was crying now, very hard. This didn't bother me at all. I was dimly aware of the others gathered around, but didn't care about them either. I said, here's another question for you. How many more are going to die? How many that you could have saved if you weren't running around in terror of a bitch goddess? Is she going to run you all your life? I don't know. Decide. Right goddamn now. Are you your own master, or are you living in the shadow of someone else? And if you are your own master, then how can you justify letting as many innocent people die as are going to die if you don't help us? Christian came back into the room. He'd apparently been outside making some phone calls. Yeah, it blew up, he said. It'll be a while before they know how many are killed. They've already found 3 bodies, though. Carrie was sobbing loudly. My heart was not breaking for her. I said, so, 3 people just died. At least 3. How many more, Carrie? She stopped crying but didn't look up. Lots, she said softly. Everyone on the planet. I stood up. What? There's nothing anyone can do about it, she said. The missiles have been launched already. Tom, Christian, and I looked at each other. The silence stretched from one end of the room to the other several times until you could hung your linen on it to dry. At last I swallowed and said, from where? I don't know, somewhere in space. They'll be here sometime tomorrow, late in the afternoon, I think. We need to warn people. Why? There isn't any way off the planet, and there are enough missiles to make the whole planet uninhabitable. I can't believe there's no way off the planet. The reason the police have ignored you is that they're investigating the sabotage of every space-going... Wait, hold on. Is this Christian or Livy talking? What the fuck?
Yeah.
No, sorry, Christian or Carrie. No, she's the one who knew about the nukes. It seems like Christian didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
The reason the police have ignored you, they're investigating the sabotage of every space-going vessel in the city and on the planet, which occurred just about the same time you were attacked yesterday. Half the reason for the attack was to make sure you couldn't do anything about it. I guess they thought you had better sources of information than you have. There's only one carrier left, which is hidden somewhere for the rest of us to use. Most of us, she swallowed. Sugar Bear. Right. Most of us on the planet left 2 weeks ago. I licked my lips. Damn, I said. I discovered then that knowing a nuclear attack was coming and being able to prevent it was much, much worse. And being unable to prevent it was much, much worse than being hit by surprise. Aaron, I don't know what made you say Steve for fuck's sake in the chat.
Steve?
Steven Brust, I think he's referring
to.
Was it the line about the silence stretching tensely from one end of the room to the other till you could hang your linen to dry on it? He's very good at throwing in a sort of a whimsical line in a tense moment. We've got to do something, said Rose. I'm open to suggestions, I said. There are more than 5,000 missiles headed for this planet, said Carrie almost tonelessly. Each of them is more than powerful enough to destroy a city and leave hundreds of square miles around it uninhabitable. Missiles are programmed by the physician. Not even Monsieur Rudd can call them off or change their course. That, said Libby, is very harsh. You know a great deal about this, I said. More than Christian, for instance. Why is that? Oh, he commented, the confusion of the narrators. No, I think the way it's written, it is pretty clear that it's Carrie. It's just that she's been sort of sobbing and mumbling up to this point, and all of a sudden she's speaking relatively clearly. Also, we had no reason to think she had this much information until this point, but we're about to find out why.
Yeah.
You know a great deal about this, I said. More than Christian, for instance. Why is that? Justin works directly for Monsieur Rudd, who's in charge of Sugar Bear of New Quebec, and in command here on Laurier. Justin talks a lot when he's coked up. I see. How does Susie fit in? Carrie bit her lip. She used to go out with Justin. He told her even more than he told me. Oh. She was never involved in Sugar Bear activities any more than I was, but she grew up with it, so she knows a lot. So she was seeing me to get information? Carrie looked at me and slowly shook her head without ever breaking eye contact. She didn't know who you were when you met, didn't figure it out until you mentioned Sugar Bear that day. She and I went along with Claude and Danielle. I guess they figured out something about the way the place first showed up. They didn't tell us until much later. Then they told her to stop seeing you, and she told them to fuck off. I guess they almost had her killed, but Justin talked them out of it. She loved you. This, as you can imagine, made me feel just glorious. I cleared my throat. I said, I'm surprised they let Justin live with how much he talks. He knows people, and he's actually pretty careful about who he talks to. I guess he must be at that. So where's the homeworld? I don't know. The physician knows. And Justin and Susie both know where the physician is. Yes. And you know where Susie is. She nodded. I said, well? A shudder went through her whole body. She and Justin are staying with Monsieur Rudd. Shit, said Christian. I should have expected that. Well, so should I said. Doesn't matter, said Jamie. We know now. Justin, said Tom. Justin is there. Libby didn't say anything, but she picked up her pistol. And, for the first time since Fred had died, a smile crossed her lips. On that note, we will be ending for the day. I was not paying attention to the time, so conveniently that chapter ended right around the 1 hour mark. Whew, it's very easy to get through an hour of this book without realizing it.
Indeed.
Anyway, sorry, I'm reaching for my chapstick. Lips dry. Anyway, thank you everyone for tuning in today. Very intense day. I'm sad to report the book does not get a lot less intense for the rest of it. I think, I don't know. If I keep it relatively short tomorrow, then we'll definitely have 2 days left. Part of me is like, oh, I might be able to power through that. Now, I can never read as many pages as I think. Where did we start today? Chapter 13. No, we started with Christian's intermezzo, right? No, we started with chapter 13. Chaos engenders confusion, springs from disorder. Yes. Okay, yeah. I think we have, we've got 2 days left. We may be wrapping up this Friday. So, brace yourselves for that. When the book is done, loose plan is to take another week off, like I do, during which I will decide what I'm going to do next. I'm definitely not, done with doing the readings. I'd like to keep doing some more. But what I'm going to read is definitely still up in the air. I don't have a specific plan. Thinking about going back to doing something in the public domain, something that's sort of the languages of another time, the kind of thing that's sort of just enjoyable to listen to. People might be able to tune in even without really knowing. They might be vaguely familiar with the plot of the book because it's famous, and they might just enjoy the sort of language. I think some people had that experience with when I was doing Emma. So, yeah, I don't know. I thought that might be fun to do another one of those. Actually, I'm just going to say it. I was also loosely thinking about maybe doing a week where I read some of my short stories, not the 3 that I have released as the audiobook, because that already exists. You can hear those there. But some of the other ones that I have written, even some that I kind of consider not that good or whatever. I don't know. It might still be fun to read them. And I have the legal right to do so. I don't have to worry about that part of it. And they're short stories. So, people could kind of tune in without having to keep up with what's going on. So I don't know if anyone would be interested in hearing some of my other short stories. I guess let me know. But yeah, I thought, I have written a lot of stuff, and it's very hard to self-release short stories. You can release them as like ebooks or whatever, but to convince people to read them is hard.
Hmm.
I think it's easier to convince people to read a novel because they're like, oh, yes, it is a whole story. If the story sounds interesting, I shall read it. But a single short story or even a collection of short stories, if they don't know who you are as a writer, they're like, well, what is it's a bunch of short stories? What are they about? What are they like? What's the tone? I don't know.
Right.
Probably a bunch of things. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know. I have a bunch of short stories. Maybe I could read some of them. People would be interested in that. So, yeah. I'm also totally open to suggestions. If you have suggestions of a public domain novel, I've been trying to read stuff that we actually have because it's more pleasant to read a physical book. But I don't know, if somebody makes a strong case for something, I guess I could see about getting an ebook on my tablet or something and read it that way. So anyway, let me know how you feel about stuff. Links down there. I know I said I was going to have the link page for my concert this weekend on Saturday up over the weekend, and I didn't, and it's Wednesday, and I still don't. It will be up by tonight. I made the image. That's the part that takes the longest time. So it will be up this evening. Also, I will update the playlist with songs that we had mentioned in the book today. So I'll see you all tomorrow, hopefully 6:30 on the button. Bye. Hitting the end stream button, and then it takes a few seconds to